Well, the Minnesota Vikings have started the season 0-2, and it might already be time to panic. Kirk Cousins still doesn't like playing in primetime, the run game is missing its star, and the defense, although better than last year, can't stop a runny nose. The Vikings have got to make a move. Do they find more talent, change up something with the play calling, or do they have a fire sale and try to get a top 5 pick? You might think it's early to abandon ship, but remember, since 1970, only 9.5% of teams that started 0-2 made the playoffs. That's just 38 teams out of 400. The odds are not in their favor. So to just stay the course, hope you'll get better, and end up in the playoffs to me is a crazier thought than to be aggressive and make some changes. But where do you start? Kirk Cousins has been the starting quarterback of this franchise for the last several years and has always finished near the top of the league in most passing statistical categories. He's efficient and accurate and is on the better side of average in the league when it comes to turning the ball over. However, the narrative is that he seems to shrink in big moments but thrives in the 1 p.m. slot. So I decided to look into this a little bit. Through 2021 and 2022, in 1 p.m. starts, the Vikings and Kirk Cousins have averaged 27 points per game, with Kirk throwing an average of 280 yards. However, in the 8 p.m. games, truly primetime games, they averaged only 19 points, and Kirk threw for an average of 189 yards per game, so 8 points fewer and nearly 100 yards less than the 1 p.m. games. So can Kirk not handle the pressure of the spotlight? The Vikings have 4 more 8 p.m. games scheduled this season. Is it safe to chalk those up as losses already? Those games don't include their matchups against the Chiefs, Chargers, Bengals, or either of the Lions games either. This team is in serious trouble if Kirk can't turn it around and figure out how to play his best football all the time. But the responsibility of moving the ball doesn't just fall to the quarterback. This run game has been abysmal through 2 weeks. I think most NFL fans knew that the loss of Dalvin Cook would be felt, but Alexander Mattison was thought to be a solid starter and decent replacement. He's durable and reliable, kind of like your old Chevy truck, but there's no pop. He's averaging just 3.3 yards per carry, but it's hard to get the run game going when there's no commitment to it. The Vikings are averaging just 13 rushes per game this season. Compare that to 23 per game last year. I understand that the situation in the Eagles game dictated that they needed to throw more to catch up, but things were close through the first half, and there was no real attempt to run the ball to set up their play action or to force the safeties to consider coming down into the box. The Vikings are not playing complementary football at all, which in turn continues to hurt their defense. Despite poor statistical output in 2 games though, their defense is very clearly better than it was last season. You don't win games in the NFL when your offense turns the ball over 3 and 4 times. Even with that amount of pressure being put on the defense though, they're performing better than last year through 2 games. Currently the 22nd ranked defense compared to 31st last year. Against the Eagles, you could see the dynamic playmakers, good pass rush, and great pursuit. Jalen Hurts was struggling to leave the pocket and he didn't have any of his signature 20-plus yard scrambles. They're allowing just 4.7 yards per play against them this year compared to 5.9 yards per play last season. There's vast improvement. Unfortunately, correcting turnovers can be one of the most difficult things to address. It can't be fixed with a new scheme or running harder in practice, especially because it's primarily fumbles. Interceptions can sometimes be fixed by watching film to know what it is the QB missed, or if the receiver ran the wrong route. But fumbling means that you're having trouble holding on to the ball. Maybe the whole team needs to carry around greased up footballs all week. I don't know, just a thought. So now it's decision time. If the Vikings think that they still stand a chance of making the playoffs, there are 2 things I would go do immediately. Go sign Kareem Hunt to help share the workload and perhaps provide a little more explosion out of the backfield. He's already taken a visit, he's healthy, and can catch the ball as well as handle third down duty. Madison is a perfectly fine running back, but he's not a workhorse. The second thing is they need to bring in help for the offensive line, even if it's just temporary while they wait to get their starters back from injury. Chase Roullier or Rodney Hudson would be my phone calls for the center position. Roullier, before injuries, was the starting center in Washington and arguably the best of that position group. Rodney Hudson would be good leadership and a solid backup once Bradbury returns. La'el Collins is also out there as well. They could afford one of the centers currently, but would need to move some salaries around and change some to signing bonus to make room for Collins if that was the move. But something must be done to prevent defensive linemen from living in the backfield and separating Kirk from Ball. However, if the front office doesn't think this year is headed in the right direction, then now is the time to make the move. The very first thing that would need to happen is to trade Kirk for as much as you can get. I know of 2 teams that would answer that phone call. First, the Jets. Rodgers went down in game 1, but they still managed to pull out a win against one of the Super Bowl favorites in the Bills. Zach Wilson is not the guy to lead them to the playoffs. Would they be willing to give up a first for Cousins, knowing that if Rodgers returns next season, they could flip him and get some return on investment? It makes a lot of sense for New York. I love that he's not afraid to repeatedly target his all-pro wide receiver, so Garrett Wilson would probably thoroughly enjoy his presence on the field. The other team that would be interested and already beat the Vikings this season? The Tampa Bay Bucks. Sure, Baker played decently in week 1, but everyone knows that Cousins would be better, and the Bucks in 1 week went from surefire top 3 pick to, could we make the playoffs in a weak division? Both teams would need to give up a player in addition to a pick to balance the salary cap, but that's easy to figure out. The point is, the Vikings with Kirk Cousins have hovered around the 500 mark since he arrived outside of last season. So was it just an outlier and things are bound to return to the mean? If so, the smartest thing that Minnesota can do is get as many assets as they can for aging veterans, including Cousins, and hope they land in a position in the draft to take their next quarterback. Let Nick Mullins take them to the promised land and enjoy the ride. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Quinn Ewers, Shadur Sanders, and more are waiting for you next April.